Good morning. Wow, this is exciting. So many faces. Oh, so many people I didn't see last night. I knew were here. How many of you? How many? Raise your hands if you were here last night. Okay, so about most of you, but about half maybe didn't come last night. So we had a great celebration. It was great fun. And we're going to actually talk about some of the same things you saw with music and dance and all kinds of crazy stuff last night. We don't have any dances planned. My name is Martha Rosselot, and I think I got the first era of our history because I've been here a long time. Yes, and I want you to begin to think about what year you did join Shallowford Presbyterian Church, because we're going to be asking you that along the way this morning. One of my resources for this review of Shallowford's history was this little book that was published for our 50th. And I saw Wendy Beater this morning and I said, why am I up here when you should be up here? Because she wrote the first chapter in this book. And so most of the information that we have came from this book because our memories are getting weak. And I was never a history student because I didn't memorize dates. So, would you give us a, yes. All right. So Bridges has put up some dates for us, and the year that Shallowford was founded was 1958, and my relationship was to that was the fact that that was the year I graduated from Agnes Scott. And our student minister, who worked out of North Avenue Church and served Agnes Scott students, also served Georgia Tech students, was a fellow named Kurt Nesbitt. So when we came back to town in the 60s, we were looking around for a house, and we drove past this property and saw a sign with Kurt Nesbitt's name on it. And I said, that's where we're going to church. So I had that connection from the very beginning. So in the 50s, I should say, in the 50s, this area of the city was just booming, and houses were being thrown up and built all over vacant property. And Shallowford Road had recently been paved, and so the Presbyterian of Greater Atlanta really wanted to establish a church in this area. So they began to talk around in the other churches to support this project of establishing a new church. So North Avenue Presbyterian Church began to get involved, and there was this couple that belonged to North Avenue Church by the name of Carmichael, and they had some property on the corner of Shallowford and Briarcliff. And so they became involved, very involved, and so at some point there was a transfer of land, and then Kurt, who was at North Avenue, was asked to come and serve this church, and eventually was established here as their pastor. And that was the beginning of 23 families, 51 persons that were charter members. And the charter member list was on the back wall. So there are a few of those folks still around. The Pendergrass family was very, very involved in that beginning. The Grodenstein family was also. Martha Pendergrass gave the piano that started Shallowford onto a big program of music. as being a very important part of Shallowford and continues very strongly today. So Kurt was established here, and so we're kind of doing this by pastors rather than decades. And so, I'm going to talk about the time that we had with Kurt Nesbitt. Let me know if you can't hear me. So the first thing I want to know is how many of you here joined Shallowford Church between 1958 and 1970? Raise your hand. That's all right.
Over 9. I thought she said 9.
1970. Well, that's a good group. That's really a great group that's still around. Some of you came from far away to express that participation. By 1960, we had grown to 100 members, and there was a groundbreaking of the chapel building. That was 2 years. It had grown from 51 to 100. And they had the groundbreaking, and then 3 months later, 35 more people had joined. So the building of the chapel was the beginning of really establishing this church. And Kurt Nesbitt was a Georgia Tech graduate. You know, the Lord has a way of putting the right person in the right place. And so the buildings were very much a part of his time with us. And so the education, when we joined the church, was in 1965. And that was at the time of the education building. It was under construction when we came, and I remember going up to the 3rd floor and seeing this huge big room, which is now the children's music room, and just being amazed by the building and the facilities that had been built here. And because I'm a Christian educator, that all really resounded with me. And so in 1965, the education building was dedicated, and the membership had soared to 650. That's the huge amount of growth that we had during this period. I have asked Jimmy to come and tell us a little bit. He was a kid at Shallowford during this time period, and Jimmy and his wife Miffy moved out to Burnett and went to Good Shepherd Church for a long time, and then they came back. So I've asked him to just share a little bit about a memory that he has during that early time period.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jimmy Moore, and that's correct. I was here. Well, we moved here in August of 1960, and that was back the Kurt Nesbitt era back then. And at that time, I was 10 years old when we moved back here. Dad got transferred to Atlanta, and we were still meeting in Oak Grove Elementary School. This property had not been developed yet, and it was still woods, and where the chapel sits, there was nothing like that here. We were still meeting in the Oak Grove Elementary School, and very quickly after we joined, my parents were a couple of years into it, and we broke ground. I remember digging the dirt, and I remember I was just 10 years old, so I don't remember a whole lot about that time. But we broke ground and dug the dirt and had the shovel ceremony and all those kind of good things. And anyway, over the church grew rapidly. I mean, the building over there that y'all know is the chapel. That was our sanctuary. That was our youth room. That was our Sunday school room. We had one Sunday school room, and my dad and mom were our Sunday school teachers. We had one Sunday school class. That's how small it was. And Dad made me play the piano. We were singing songs and things like that in the morning. So those were some of the memories back then. Kurt Nesbitt had about 5 or 6 kids. We got a bar family, and Kurt drove this light blue Volkswagen Bug. And I remember when they would come to church, all 6 of them, or 7 or 8, how many was in there? And they would pile out of this little Volkswagen. That was something else. Of course, we were different ages. We threatened one time to get one of these big old crank keys and stick on the back of the Volkswagen. We didn't do that. Youth was pretty wild, back in those days, kind of like they are today. But, by the way, anybody who helped raise me in here, Mark, we thank you. I apologize for my behavior back then. But anyway, as time went on, this building had been built. We outgrew the chapel in no time at all. And this building was built. This wall did not exist back in that time. This was our sanctuary. It's now a Heritage Hall, of course, but that wall didn't exist. This room went all the way to where the library is, right across from the kitchen. And that's where we had our spaghetti splashes, we call it, fundraiser. And things like that. Had a great time. You know, they have seen some pictures. I was here last night, so I didn't see what the pictures were, but somebody said there's a couple of them in there, but we looked like we were having too much fun in the kitchen and things like that. So anyway, we raised some money, and we called it Red Carmichael. Red Carmichael had this little, where the other church is next door. There was a little brown shack. It was a cabin, nothing more than a country cabin. And this was their place where the Carmichael would come out during the weekends and things. Atlanta was a long way away. And they would come out here, and that was all that existed. This area right here was all trees. And then their country house. And we had picnics out there. And Red Carmichael was, I remember when we would come out of church, once the chapel was built, we would come out of church, and Red Carmichael would give everybody a stick of juicy fruit gum. That was his standing operating procedure. Everybody just stick the juicy fruit gum, and I still like juicy fruit to this day. I remember that him. Bob Moss was our first youth minister, and Bob came on board after this church, the chapel part had been built. And Bob was a student over at Columbia Seminary, and he lived in the basement of the chapel. There used to be a little kitchen over there, and what we know now today is the coat closet, the janitor closet. That was where his bed was, and that's where he lived while he was going over to the seminary over there. Our mission trips consisted of a very small group. Of course, we would go into Atlanta, nothing like we have today, going around the country and places like that. But we would go down into Atlanta, and some of the sections there, we painted houses. We did the same kind of work that they do today, but it's just like it was local. Remember that, those kind of things like that. And Joe Reagan was he was my senior high Sunday school teacher, and when I left in 1968 to go to college, my parents were still here. And this building got small, and that's what they built sometime during that section of the sanctuary. And we came back for the dedication of that, and then I was gone for about 4 or 5 years. And then until they we celebrated the 40th anniversary, we came back for that. And then Miffy and I came back during that time, got married, had kids, doing all those kind of things. And we came back to visit for the 50th, and that's when I returned to Shallowford, and Miffy was the first time. And so anyway, our kids had grown up and gone by that time, and so we decided that, let's go take a look at and met all the folks in the music and everything else. Our choir was non-existent. We didn't have a choir back in those days. There was about 4 people who knew how to sing when we had so that was kind of like our choir, but then as we began to grow, of course it got bigger and bigger, and here we are today. So those were some of the memories that I remember from way back when. So that's a long time ago. So.
But people like Jim Reagan are still around. I have passed a lot of these out that just happen to be my personal copies, and you might want to just flip through them, pass them along the rows while we're talking. And I just love the cover of this one, which is with the children's artwork on it, and their precious little messages that are in their own language and in their own art. That was Yeah, 1995. They're from 70s directories, and we got them so new and electronic, we won't probably have those printed things again, so that's sad because those are really great.
Either speaking in the mic or
Okay,
speak
I'm
loud,
sorry,
please.
forgot that.
Hey, Rebecca, she back there?
Yeah, she is.
Yes.
Yeah, she's back there.
Can you do something for the volume?
You want to turn it up?
Put their shoes on, kiddo.
Standing on the chair. Coming.
Some people just have to have gratitude.
What?
All right. Is that better? Yeah. I'm sorry. Jimmy's stories are better than any of mine, but I do want to add that during this time, we started the Christmas tableau out front with eventually live animals that got out and all. The animals in the children's play yard. And of course, the high achievement was the girl who got to be the angel. Manger angel. All right. We also purchased land for the ball field, and that was paid for in just a very brief period of time. And the membership was up to 844. And 450 in Sunday school. The Hideaway started in '67 as a service project for the men's group, and that turned out to be so successful it killed itself. We were having to have two policemen a duty. So, but it was lots of fun. We had the music and the kids came and danced. That was a high school event every Friday night. Then we began to have architectural plans for the complete campus, and those dreams were soon fulfilled. We had our first woman elder during this period, and then in 1970, Kurt resigned, and we began to look for a new pastor. So who's next? Me. Yes.
Francis Carter.
Yep. It was Francis Reed. Francis Reed, I think. Francis Carter. Oh, Peggy, yes, it was. Peggy Lindbergh. Yeah. And those of you.
Okay. How many of you came to Shallowford? Tom R. was here from 1972 to 1992. 20 years. How many of you came during that? Okay. That was when we came. Okay. One of the things about Tom that made him so special to me, I found that as I listened to Tom, I became a very sloppy listener because it was impossible not to listen to Tom R. and his stories. And you knew it, he was a storyteller. And just like his son can do, Tom did it for us as we listened. And I have a wonderful quote that Jack Reed, those of you who were here then, may know. At the age of 9, he wrote, "In some churches, they make you bored by giving you the same thing over and over. In this church, however, every time you go, you have a new experience. And when Dr. R speaks, everything seems to relate to me each time I go." 9 years old. In addition to Tom being an incredible preacher, he was also a great assimilator of staff. And many of us came because of the music. I'd grown up under a man who had been educated at Westminster Choir College, so when I heard that Bob Chambliss was here and he was a graduate of Westminster Choir College, I knew I was going to come. But there was another piece of the staff here that was very important to us, and that was the Christian education. I had heard, we were living in Southwest Atlanta, and I had come to Shallowford for a discovery learning workshop 2 years before we moved out here. So I knew Shallowford also because of the emphasis on Christian education, which was really important to me for our children to grow up in, and ourselves. During this, so Martha created all kinds of wonderful Christian education, and having those are the two guys that teach. How many of you taught Sunday school while Martha was doing Christian education? Look at Brady's finger. Jensen, I did several times. Also, Bernie Overton started the Shelter Training and Counseling Center. Of all the things, though, that I look back on and remember, Louise Wallace and Marilyn Wynn were the secretaries without computers, and our congregation grew to 1,000 people. And isn't it interesting that those two people managed all the communications and the letters and everything? Sometimes it just blows me away. That's what they did. In addition, the youth program just grew with when they called Dave Fry to be associate pastor and youth minister. Then the youth program really took off. And during Tom's time here, Dave was here, Jerry Blacklaw, Dale Moody, Brad Walker, Terry Trigo, and Libby Smith Purcell all worked for the church with the youth. And I was looking back at the impact that this had on them in either ordained ministry or Christian education. The ones that we could think of last night were Tom R., Angela Bailey Drummond, Barbara Bailey Shuffleton, Libby Smith Purcell, Danny Reed, Amanda Burns, Kimmy, and Jody Reedy and Ray are all either went into Christian education or are ministers.
Jerry Rigo, too.
Yeah, that's true. She did. She was working here. That's right.
Cindy was the minister of music.
Yes, she was. And then during this time, for the facilities, what was added was the sanctuary. And there was quite a discussion about it before it was built as to whether it should be a multi-purpose room and we could use it for all these different things, or whether it was just for worship. And the idea of worship won out, as you know. And so that was dedicated on May 23rd, 1976, and the total cost of the building was $425,000. Yeah. That building committee, and for those of you who were here then, you'll enjoy the names. It was chaired, by Skip Skipwith and Al Clark, Shaq Shackelford, Jim Stewart, Martha Rosselot, Alice Smith, and Tom R. was the ex officio member. So it was an exciting time when we opened it. This was also the time that we began to stretch out and realize that the church needed to be more than just about our growth here, but to reach out to others. Ed Hubbard at one point recommended that benevolences be 10% of the cash flow in. Tom took a group to Ecuador, who only one person was not named Tom in this group. Ed Carruthers, Tommy R., Tom R., and Tom Barnes visited Bob and Estelle Armstead there. And later, Tom took a group in 1981 to Ghana, and Freddie McNeely, Lee Lindsay, and Dick Smith went on this. And when I was reading about this, I was so surprised to find out that this was the first time that Dick Smith had left the United States, because I think about Dick Smith traveling all over everywhere, but this was his initial trip out. We also really started with Habitat. We had a boat family that came, the Chaminade Ponds, and the idea of building a house, fixing a house up for them was what got us connected with Habitat. As you can see from the plaques over here, the Habitat involvement has continued. But the first one we did was to redo the house that Chaminade Ponds could go into, and you were real involved with all this too, with Habitat. The food pantry got its start during this time and has continued with, thanks to Bobby Hope and Von Dunnigan, and all volunteers have done so much with it. We also tried for a while a clothes closet, which was less successful, and we finally decided we'd move on from that. Meals on Wheels used the kitchen in the chapel to prepare the meals to be sent out. Red Cross blood drives, the night shelters, Central, Druid Hills, and Clifton. And then the other piece of Tom R's thing that was very powerful to me was stewardship. Tom taught me, I had grown up in the Baptist church, and you tithe, because that was what you were supposed to do. Tom taught me about the joy of giving, that God doesn't need our money. God doesn't need our money to do what God needs to do, but we need to give. And that was the first time that I got excited about giving and excited about inviting other people to give. So I have certainly credit Tom to changing my attitude about giving to the church. The other piece of the Shallowford that was really important to our family was the fellowship. Most of our best friends were at Shallowford, and we had lots of activities. We had family camp, which started out, and we went to family camp. We slept in tents. We slept or cabins or trailers. We cooked our own food, and we divided up, and your kids worked with somebody else's, some other adults, and you had somebody else's kids, which certainly worked better because other kids were much happier to work. But this is where our son Wade learned how to make pizza, was working with Ted and Ellen Bailey on making pizzas. But it was really a do-it-yourselfer. And what happened in family camp was it grew so that there weren't places big enough to accommodate us anymore. So it was very interesting. We kind of outgrew ourselves because we got too big for any of the camps that we could find to do. Canoe Club. There were a number of you who asked us about Canoe Club last night. And what did we do? We went canoeing. This was Ben Johnson's brilliant idea, and he got a group of us, small group the first time, and we met for dinner once a month because it takes lots of planning to go on canoe. And our first trip was down the Swanee River. Well, again, Canoe Club grew and grew, and the last time I remember our gathering was at Mary Virginia and Ed Shores in their backyard. We had over 100 people. Yeah. And so nobody had houses big enough to accommodate, to feed all, for us to eat. And so it kind of, again, was a victim of its own success. And the other thing we did that was really just kind of grew up, there were a lot of us that were runners, and we ran Peachtree every year. And so we would meet after Peachtree, and people who didn't run would bring the food in coolers to a tree in the middle of Piedmont Park. And there would be 30 or 40 of us gathering there to eat and enjoy company after the road race. So these were our memories of the time while Tom R. was minister. You're next.
Would anybody else like to add something from that era?
And Godspell, the different cantatas that we did.
Yes, and who was the leading actor and singer in Godspell? What's that?
Jeff Cunningham.
Yeah.
That handbell we purchased with green stamps.
Right, yeah. For those of you who didn't hear it, that was a green stamp here. That's how we called the first handbell. Yeah, yes.
We had Wednesday night suppers where everybody was bringing a dish, covered dish.
Yeah.
We did it in the break.
No
Right.
caterer.
Yeah, I don't have a year.
Bridges,
No.
did you mention them all in the night visitors that we had, the play?
I do remember a mall in the night visitors very well. For those of you who don't know, our son was a mall.
Yes.
And at that time, the lower level of the sanctuary wasn't finished. And it was cold being in December. And so the cast dressed over here and then walked over through the basement, come up behind up into the chancel. Well, he had on his costume for the play, plus he had on some long, tall, orange and white socks. And he appeared on stage wearing that.
Good job.
Louis,
Dr. R was there,
vanilla
too.
cheese and egg salad sandwiches for church lunch.
Okay.
On the church lunch after church, Louis always had pimento cheese and egg salad sandwiches, and that was lunch.
The other thing
That was good.
my major thing, remember that?
She mentioned that, right? With the major angel and all the, and they got moved one time, right? Yeah.
I think someone mentioned his name briefly, but Bob Simpson was a important part of church. Now, I grew up singing in chapel choir, and he was there for a long time, and we really liked him.
Okay. Bob Simpson did a lot for this church. When he retired as choir director, that's when he really got involved with Habitat.
Yeah.
Led us into that. How many folks in here have worked on a Habitat house? That's at least a third. Yeah. There was another show of hands. Oh, canoe club. We went canoeing. That's a smaller, older group.
Most of the time, remember that.
No. We did go one time, twice. Yeah, those were not overnight trips. When Tom left, we were without a pastor for 2 years. Paul Hooker was on staff at that time as associate, and he was the acting head of staff for a year. He moved on, and we had Davidson Phillips and Terry Beverly each for 6 months, and then Ray came. The PNC that was looking for a minister at that time consisted of Ted Bailey, Laura Bishop, Clyde Buchanan, Margaret Jones, Bart McMillan, and Bob Simpson. And other than Simpson, I think all of you are here right now. Ray was a pastor of a church in Stanton, Virginia at that time, and he had grown up in Atlanta. And his mother was being treated for cancer. He came down here in the fall of '93 to see her, and he knew Ben Johnson, and he met with Ben at that time, and that was when Ben suggested that he might want to put his name in the pot. And 6 months later, or a year later, I guess, we welcomed him as our new minister. This was a period in which Betsy had mentioned earlier some foreign mission work, but missions in general really grew during this time. The missions committee actually was split into 2 committees: a foreign missions and local missions. And foreign missions did a number of things on the Mexican border. Charles Snyder was very big and instrumental in mission work at Burkina Faso, and the Vogels, John's here somewhere, yep, have visited there. A meaningful trip?
Extremely, yeah. It's devastating to see what third world looks like.
The other large part of that was going to the Mexican border, to Frontera de Cristo. And who's been on that trip? Yeah. Okay. And local missions at that time became very involved with Habitat, as you see here, with the night shelter at Druid Hills, and with Meals on Wheels, which operated out of the small kitchen under the chapel. Let's see. Oh, and the Frontera de Cristo was a connection once again with the Armisteads, who Tom had met in Ecuador, and they were down on the border, and so they involved us in the border mission. During this time, the Alzheimer's group was started. Margaret McGarity was one of them who lobbied for this, right? And that has been an ongoing thing. It meets the only Alzheimer's group in Atlanta that meets every week. And they've been doing that for many years now. In 1998, we started a capital campaign to build a great hall and the atrium to connect the buildings. And that was the big thing of that era. With a word about architects. There was a Cunningham who did the chapel building. Different Cunningham. Bob Cunningham did the next 3 buildings. And Bob was, I think still is, a member of this congregation. They do not live in Atlanta now. And it's kind of interesting to look at it. The plans for the sanctuary, built in 1976, are about 8 pages. The plans to add the office space below it, something like 90 pages. That's what architectural work has become, is making a lot of paper. Let's see, that building committee, yeah, regulations, right? Yeah, the first number of pages in a set of plans is nothing but complying with all the regulations and citing the appropriate code. That building committee consisted of John Hilly, Jim Stewart, Blake Atwater, Laura Bishop, Brad Brannon, George Hemingway, Kerry Kent, Lynn Mathis, and I was also on that. Now, and somebody mentioned earlier this wall didn't exist. This level of this place really was all wide open, with the exception of the kitchen. And this was our sanctuary at one time. It was rising over in that corner. That was that corner.
They moved her up there.
I'm correct. But it wasn't this room. So when we did the Great Hall, we obviously broke this up, and at that time we had a sanctuary and didn't need this for services, and we put this wall in and built the Great Hall. Interesting little sidelight in that. If you notice, the structure in the sanctuary and in the Great Hall is the massive wooden columns and frames. Those were built by the same company, both of those buildings, and part of the crew that installed them for the sanctuary came down to do it for the Great Hall some 20 years later.
Some of it was done by Kurt Nesbitt's father of the crosses.
So what now?
Some of the cross work was done by Kurt Nesbitt's father.
Oh, okay. Did not know that. When we did this, we did improve handicap access. We extended the second, third levels so that we could put an elevator in. And that was, we improved accessibility greatly by doing that. It was dedicated on September 10, 2000, a year and a day before 9/11. That always helps you remember when it was dedicated. At this time we had what was called Partners in Ministry. 4 congregations active here in our facility. Our Shallowford Presbyterian Church, the Indian Church, which still is in existence and still meets here, the Korean Church, which moved out and has a fairly large facility on their own now. And then there was a Hispanic church, which was pastored by Waldo Pineda, which was quite a character and quite a group. We would have services generally once a year where we used all languages. And so we would be praying at the same time in English and Spanish and Indian and Korean. During this time, Networks, which is an area northeast that's still in existence and does things to help people with their finances and teach them how to do finances and provides food and some opportunities for them. That's still going on. An important thing happened here when Ben Johnson retired. The session named him Scholar in Residence. And one of the things he did as a part of that was to formed small groups. They met in homes for Bible study. And these would be groups of 8 to 10 people and would meet generally weekly. We had one that met at our house for a while, and we even had a marriage out of it. Let's see. Was here. And you know what you're famous for here. Would you like to talk about it?
Well, I was here while I was a student at Columbia Theological Seminary for 2 years, 1992 to 1994. So in that, the nun category over there, during that transition time, I arrived a week after Tom R. left, and I overlapped with Ray Norsworthy one day. So, served under 3 different interim pastors, which was really good experience for someone coming out of seminary to see the leadership styles of 3 very different and very gifted senior pastors. So I think Bridges is alluding to the confirmation process that we started during that interim time, which is still going on today. I think 2 years ago I was invited back to see it, and I had actually kind of forgotten what it was that we had done, but to see some of the rituals and things that we had instituted still going on was just really powerful for me. So I wanted to say that to give you all hope, because I know that you're entering another interim period, that a lot of things, interim periods can be times of experimentation where you try new things and take on new things that don't have to last forever, because you could say, oh, we're just doing it during this time. But it can also lead to new things that do have endurance. So I thank you. And for those who don't know, I went on and am now teaching at Columbia Theological Seminary. I've been there since 2004 in the area of Christian education.
Thank you. Oh, all right. I'll sit down. There's some others we could talk about, but we had Bruce Meyer as interim, and Bruce was famous for the shepherd crook put across in front of the sanctuary. And there was an occasion when someone got long-winded who was making an announcement. Bruce used his hook. And then later, someone used the hook on Bruce. Yeah, he was here this weekend. Let's see. Then we look up. We move. I got. I won't take the time. It's time to talk about the transition to Chris. I'm going to name the PNC. Alan Rosselot, chairman of the PNC. Jessica Camp, C.J. Dryman, Joan Scott, Dick Smith, and Jay Turney served on that PNC.
So hopefully, I won't knock this off here. So I'm Alan Rosselot, for those of you that may not know me. For those of you that were here last night with the bingo card, they had the different blocks of, what you could initial, what you had done at Shallowford. Probably 5 or 6 or 7 of them applied to me. I was born here, I was baptized here, I was married here. That's my wife, why we got married here in Tennessee. So I need to speak in something like that. Yes. So anyway, so I've been around for a while, and I want to just add a couple of things to part of the back history, and then I'm going to talk about the most recent period, which most of us have been through. I'm going to ask you a question about that in a second. But one addition to Betsy's list of the youth leaders while we were here was Paul Hooker. In addition to being an associate pastor, he had the opportunity to work with my youth group when we were seniors, and I see Jason Jones, who's one of my classmates back there, and I'm sure he had quite a lot of fun with us. We were a small but powerful group. And the other thing I would add, Catherine mentioned Godspell earlier. I was actually in Godspell. I don't even know if you remember this. I played it, of course, Godspell, you can do it in lots of different ways. For some reason, they decided they needed a dummy. A ventriloquist dummy. So I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I was a ventriloquist dummy. I didn't even speak the line, I mouthed it. It was, go with them too. I still remember it was me mouthing it, and I think it was probably Jeff Cunningham off to the side, with a big, deep bass voice. This little tiny kid. So fun memories. The one question I wanted to ask is, how many people have come to Shallowford in the last 10 years? Wow. That's a fantastic thing. I think a lot of us have lived the last 10 years, and so we're short on time. I'm not going to go through everything because we've experienced so much. As I thought about it, I'm on the personnel committee, and in addition to being the chair of the PNC that called Chris, I've experienced a lot of Shallowford through the lens of the personnel committee and what we do. And so my perspective is probably a little different from yours. And so if you have things to chime in about in the last 10 years, tell me as we're going, but we are a little short on time. But as I thought about it, what has Shallowford been in the last 10 years? And so much of what you heard about, I think, we're still doing. And we've started new things. And so all of that rolled into me, sort of growth and evolution. And when we called Chris, it was very intentional on the part of the PNC to look forward, to appreciate who we are, who we've been, but also to look forward. And that's why seeing so many hands in this room, to me, is so rewarding, because that's worth, I think. It's part of this congregation to welcome people, to reach out, and to continue to grow and evolve. And so I think that, to me, is sort of the theme of the last 10 years from the interim period that we went through calling Chris and his ministry here. Chris, I have a specific date here because I remember it well, October 24th, 2010, our committee stood in front of the congregation in the sanctuary and took a bit of a risk when we introduced a 28-year-old as the senior pastor. Fortunately, all of you that were here welcomed him with open arms, and those of you who came after he started, also sort of everybody kind of got over the youth really quickly, because Chris was special, for sure. His first day here was January 4th, 2011. His first day preaching was January 9th, 2011. And as we all know, his last day here was May 6th. So we had a little over 7 years of wonderful ministry with Chris. I didn't go back to look at membership numbers from when he started. The most recent I had was we were 887 members in 2014. We're 1,100 now. That's across all ages. Lots of babies, lots of youth, lots of folks coming in from just everywhere. And so that growth is a part of who we are. We started new worship experiences like Messy Church. We've got new ways to communicate with all the wonderful things that we're doing in the digital world, but also in the print world with Sacred Space. Mission, the first time we'd ever gone to Haiti. The Memorial Drive ministry and all of that's associated with that has been within the last 10 years. More recently, La Amistad, continuing to work on habitat projects, all of these wonderful things, and I'm sure I'm missing out on some of it. Of course, I'm going to say this as people are leaving, because part of the wonderful part of our ministry that has continued to grow and evolve is our music program. And the number of people who, current and former people leaving to go get ready for worship, part of that wonderful ministry here that just continued to expand and what's going on under Emily Floyd's great leadership. So I'm going to transition with that into the staff, and we've grown from a staff perspective based on sort of a long-range vision of what we needed to support the growth. And in some ways, you have to build it in order so that things come. And sometimes people will look at us and say, well, why are we hiring for this position? And why are we doing that? Well, if we're looking down the road, we're investing in what we need, not only what we need now, but what we need in the future. And so with our music program, with hiring Rebecca as a full-time communications director, with hiring a director of operations, putting some support in place for our program staff to be able to focus on doing what they do so well, which is to plan and be creative and engage the congregation. And so Catherine was called as our first associate pastor since the early, I'm not sure if I get the date right or not, but somewhere in the early 1990s, we had not had an associate pastor until Catherine was called as our associate pastor for mission and discipleship, or as a discipleship and mission, or whatever. The youth program, Jay York was here for most of that time, and the timing was fantastic for this wonderful youth intern to be hired on, and then 6 months later, youth director left, and the youth intern became our interim youth director. And then a little while later, Bradley became our youth director. So, just the continuity in that program and what's going on in youth is just fantastic. Parish associate Robbie resigned, retired at the end of last year. Laura Jernigan steps in. So the transitions in the program ministries, children's ministry, Andrea Adams filled in for a while during that period, and then leading into Margaret Evans becoming our full-time director of children's ministries. And I mentioned support staff as well. The other part that I want to mention, Bridges stopped with facilities with Great Hall in 2000. Well, of course, in 2011, we embarked on a capital campaign to renovate the chapel and the chapel basement and all of that. Wonderful, improvements to our facilities. And then, short time later, 2 years later, the Rooted in Faith, Forward and Hope campaign kicked off, which has allowed for so much of the sanctuary improvement, the organ, the funding of the mission fund, all of that. So all of this continuity of growth and looking forward. And so I'm going to stop there because we really are at sort of our time. And just, I know I've left out memories that all of you have and sort of shared it from my own perspective. But what I'm going to do at this point is sort of tie in to continuing to look forward. As the chair of the interim search committee, where we are as a church was really fun to see in this process, because the people that came to us interested in serving as our interim were fantastic. We had lots and lots of folks who wanted to come join us and be a part of the ministry here. And so we're really excited that John Sims is coming to us and will be with us in about a month. He responded, I forwarded it to him, the announcement that was sent out roughly 2 weeks ago about him coming. Just so he had seen it before, but he responded back to me by email saying, I think I've been graciously overhyped. I said, yeah, well, we have high expectations. He does have to back to follow, and he knows it. So I guess I'm going to conclude with saying the last 10 years of Shallowford have seen such an incredible period, and I'm excited to see what's in front of us, and I hope all of you are as well. With that, I don't know if there are any specific stories about the last 10 years.
Alan, can I just say something?
Yes.
Last night when Tommy talked and gave us so much information that was wonderful and that we can learn from, I just felt like as he sat there and talked, we're already doing so many things that he says makes a healthy church, bringing Christ Jesus to the forefront of people's lives. And I feel so happy about what's going on. We've had interims before and worked all through that. and have come out on the very top each time. So we are healthy, and we all need to know that. It's a wonderful church. Thank you, Tommy, for telling us some areas that we're already doing.
Were there any other sort of highlight memories from the last 10 years that you needed to share? Yeah.
I don't know if anybody said it, but Bob Chambliss was our youth director for a while.
Oh, yeah. You're two.
He said for 2 years.
For 2 years. I did not know that. No wonder you lost all your hair. I can get away with it. John.
One of the things that I was reminded of, well, we've only been here 9 years, but one of the real important people in the life of this church was George Moonway, who did so many things behind the scenes, but the elevator, the chapel, and there's so many reminders of him and his life here that I think we ought to honor today.
Thank you, John. I hope everybody could hear that, but just and a couple of them are sitting right back there, and thank you for your family's contribution. The Hemingway family has been such an important part of this church, and the chapel renovation, just incredible in particular. Anything else anybody wanted to share?
Yeah. Can't leave out the contributions that Jay Turning has done with helping to raise the money and making everybody excited about giving money.
Jay makes you feel good about opening up the wallet.
One thing this church has done extremely well, and we hear this over and over again in Montreat, is the support of youth. And that's financially, emotionally, prayerfully, and that's, I'm going to say that's near and dear to my heart, but it's something that is definitely unusual in a lot of the Presbyterian churches to have these elders, these people on the nominating committee and the pastor search committees and things like that don't happen. And that's a way of keeping your youth in, and you can have healthy children, just one of those things that we do.
As someone who grew up in the youth program here, and I see several of sort of my age group in here, we value that very much, and I'm particularly pleased since I have 2 youth right now myself, that we continue to support them.
Well, I would echo that because we talked about, someone talked about those from this church who have gone into ministry. There are those of us who have not gone into ministry but are active members, not here, but of our churches out and about. And the way this church really nurtured the whole family and made it part of what it is you do, so that when you go out into the world in other places, then we can be Shallowford representative now in Hendersonville and the International Church or things like that.
But we are over and the noise is picking up, so
Before we go, let's bow our heads for just a moment. Gracious God, we are so thankful for this place. We're so thankful for this community. We're so thankful for the love that is shared here. And we want to spread that with our neighbors, with those that are around us, those that live far away, that have come back and to celebrate with us for these 60 years that Shallowford has been in this place, and about the ministry and the work that you give to us. Be with us this day, and be with us as we go away. Amen.